Hi, welcome to another episode of Unlocking Medicare. I'm your host, Tyrone Carr. Today we have another great guest, Tabitha Mullen with UHC, as well as the president of NABIB.
Yep.
And so we thank you for coming on the show today and just answering some questions and giving us some insight as to what's kind of going in Medicare, but answer a specific question that we hear all the time from clients that have transitioned from original Medicare, a Medigap, into a Medicare Advantage, and now some have dealt with prior authorizations.
Yes.
And I'm sure you're very familiar with those.
Yep.
And so help us to understand what a individual can do to kind of eliminate the prior authorizations. Is that something that fall underneath the client, or is it something more along the lines of the doctor's office?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. It's a nuanced question with some nuanced answers. So I will say my day job is a growth manager for the state of Michigan for United Healthcare, but I am here today representing the president of Metro Detroit chapter of NABIP. So I'm going to try to keep my answers as broad as possible and speak with that NABIP voice. So prior authorizations are actually something I think consumers should have in the last couple of years seen a lot less of, depending on what areas of their healthcare they're focused on. I think quite a few years ago, we were seeing a lot more in certain aspects of their healthcare, and we've seen those lessen. We've seen carriers as a whole take a look at prior authorizations, where they're needed, where they're not needed, where there's a little too much oversight, and of course, where there's opportunities for those prior authorizations to be real barriers to care, right? And that's what you want to avoid. I think the first thing you want to think about, as not only as an agent, but also as a consumer when it comes to prior authorizations, is that prior authorizations exist to protect clients, to protect carriers, of course, and to protect CMS as well. If you kind of think back, and I know this is a little nuanced here and it's anecdotal, but if you think back maybe 5-6 years ago, how many of those calls were you getting from clients that were like, Ty, I don't know what happened. Somebody called me and asked me if I needed a wheelchair, and then I got all this DME equipment sent to my house. I never approved this. I never asked for this, but I've got all of this, and I checked with my carrier, and I was charged for it. Like, the carrier paid for all of this DME, right? Now, of course, that's just specifically DME, but we saw a lot of an influx in those charges inappropriately, and so prior authorizations went into place and were supported by organizations like NABIP to protect CMS for those payouts when those DME equipment were charged to carriers and to CMS and it was inappropriate. And you see it for other things. Like right now, there's a big influx in prior authorizations for, right now, the hot and sexy topic is semaglutides, right? And so you have Ozempic and Wegovy. And you have a lot of carriers being very specific about those prior authorizations and the step programs required. So when you talk about, Ozempic, they're like, okay, well, this is going to be declined if you don't have a history of diabetes, or if you have a history of diabetes, but you don't already have a history of using like metformin prior as a step before, because the actual drug is so expensive, and carriers are going to take on that. And when carriers take on more expenses, they never really take on more expenses, right? They take it on for the short term, and then that cost is going to be associated somewhere else that's going to come back to consumers or to CMS. So they go, your doctor needs to provide, a prior authorization to show what the need is for that. And if you have, a good provider that's on top of things or has a good staff, you might be able to call same day and they go, well, Ty, you don't have diabetes, but you're insulin resistant. So we just need to fill out this form and send it in same day. Within a day or two for some of these, consumers and these clients, depending on how well, that document was submitted and if it was submitted correctly, people are getting really quick turnarounds on these prior authorizations, especially when it's apparently clear that what was submitted for the prior authorization is appropriate and deemed necessary. So I think it's just important to remember that the goal with prior authorizations is to make sure that clients are protected, that they're not being inappropriately influenced by anyone and anything. And I say that carefully, right? Because you don't want to accuse people of being bad actors or providers or carriers of being bad actors. But we know that in every industry, there are bad actors, and that's why checks and balances exist. And if there weren't bad actors, we wouldn't have, say, maybe the opioid crisis, where, sometimes providers are pushed by pharmaceutical reps to push certain drugs or certain services by hospital systems because, we'd rather you do it here on hospital site and the hospital gets a bigger paycheck for something versus if you do it off-site later and wait a week. So, of course, again, all of this to say it's important to make sure that there's not barriers to care that are necessary for clients, but a lot of these prior auths exist for a reason, not only protect clients, but again, if we're talking about carriers and CMS eventually passing the buck, when things become more expensive for a private commercial insurance company, where is that money going to be moved over to? So if they're taking a hit because there's a lot of one service or one drug being executed that's costing them a lot of money, where are they going to cut, in other areas to make up for that and still have a profit? Sure. But I think overall we've seen in the industry, especially in the last few years, especially with those services that make a lot more sense and them being declined, or the necessity of the prior authorization really being an actual barrier to care and being a health emergency, we've seen a lot of those be eliminated. And we've also seen the process for prior authorizations become a lot easier across the board. But to your point, I know part of your nuanced question was like, what can consumers do? I think making sure that your hospital system or your medical system, as far as your provider or the office that you use, is actually going to answer your phone calls and is actually going to follow up and knows how to submit those prior authorizations when necessary. I know when I go to a doctor and he knows that there's going to be a prior auth for, a specialty service I need, he goes, okay, I know you've got this, insurance carrier. I'm pretty sure they're going to need a prior authorization for this. We'll submit that. They'll probably receive it while you're on your way home before you even get there, so that tomorrow you'll have the green light to go and get this test done.
We had an instance where it was probably 3 months ago, where we had a client that had called and they had received a catheter in the mail.
Ooh, yeah.
And so they gave us a call and said, Tyrone, I just received this random catheter in the mail. And at the time, I didn't recognize the particular client as far as, medical reasons or history. And so I asked him just follow-up questions, and he's like, yeah, I don't take any medications or of any kind. Yeah. And so just randomly, and then a week later, I was watching the news, and I believe it was the state of Ohio. It was a medical practice that was billing for catheters, and it was like a $2 billion medical fraud case. Yeah. And so I've learned over the years, share with people when they question, prior authorizations, is, to your point, it's to protect them, the medical providers, the insurance carriers, but at the same time, if there's that medical fraud, that's going to come back down to us as taxpayers, and that's going to cost us all money in our insurance premiums. And so that's the response I've given. But I think it's helpful when you hear from a carrier or an association that is representing, as far as the professionals, the consumer, as well as the insurance carriers, and has greater insight. It's just another set of eyes and ears that we can share with our clients and stuff. So if you could just share a little bit about what NABIB does and what it does for us as agents and helping us with our clients and just the general public, if you could just briefly share on what the purpose of what you guys do. Yeah,
I'll make it really brief because I could go on for too long. So NABIP is the rebrand for what was NAHU. If you're a Michigan agent, it was MDAHU, or Metro Detroit Association of Health Underwriters. Now, you and I both know that's not really necessarily what brokers and agents are these days. Whether you're on the MedSup side or the group side, you're not actually doing a lot of that actual underwriting yourself anymore. So the association was rebranded to NABIP, National Association of Benefit Insurance Professionals. So I represent currently, up until June, I'm the president of the Metro Detroit chapter of NABIP. And it's really an organization that is catered to agents, brokers, people with life and health licenses, and protecting them and providing resources and education and networking opportunities, CEs, development. Those are all the values value adds. And of course, other people and other organizations, are invited to participate and to become members. You don't have to have a life and health license. More and more often we're seeing, especially in our chapter and in large chapters in California and Florida, we're seeing some of these, ancillary organizations or these vendors that are kind of in the peripheral, like, Advanced Diabetes Supply, right? You might use that organization to help get the necessary drugs and approvals for your clients on, diabetes medications, and they work directly with agents for referrals, right? Or some of these provider organizations where they represent or help manage agents, but maybe aren't, licensed with life and health. So we've got a lot of those organizations and those personnel as participants, which really helps, in my opinion, the organization, so that, if you're attending a networking event or a programming event, you're in the same room with all of these people that are the exact resources you need. So of course we do fun stuff. We do, engagement events with our membership, and guests are always allowed to attend and register for most of these events. Tigers Day and golf outings, things that are really traditional networking events. This week we've got a CEO panel on Wednesday. So United Healthcare's CEO, Blue Cross, HAP, Priority, McLaren, their CEOs and VPs are all going to attend on a panel, and we've got questions ready. We've got close to 150 people registered now. And that's really a unique opportunity for an agent or a broker in the state of Michigan to show up to an event, have lunch, hear from CEOs, and then literally interact with them, when you've got some of these nuanced questions. But the organization's purpose is, of course, to cater to those agents and to, provide opportunities and development and education for them. But something unique that we do too is lobby on their behalf. So when we get a lot of feedback from agents about new CMS regulations, that's an opportunity for us to take all that feedback, give notes back to CMS when they still have that time for notes before final rules and secondary comments and clarifications. And when there's ambiguity or there's pushback, a big one recently was agents being, clarified as TPMOs and what that means, and call recordings and changes to compensation. We take all of that back as an organization. We speak with one voice. In February every year, myself and our board for Metro Detroit goes to DC, and we lobby on behalf of these local agents, and we explain to members of Congress to push back onto CMS and apply a little pressure or apply a little heat for regulatory changes. Hey, this is an agent sitting next to me. This is not a third-party marketing organization. You need to understand the difference so that you can explain that to CMS. And then also, ask some of these members of our legislature to participate in, actual legislation that will help agents and help their clients and their consumers, depending on what we're seeing in the field as experts. And we do that at a local level too in Lansing. So there's a lot of benefits of becoming a member, not only from a professional development and education and networking, but also to have your voice heard. If you're a member and we do these local, talks and meetings with legislators in Lansing, our members are invited to participate. They come, we have like a little breakfast or a little luncheon. We talk about speaking with one voice. We talk about the talking points. We figure out who your local representative is, and then we go up to Lansing and we have those meetings. So there's a lot of good benefits, but also, of course, I like the events too. A good Tigers Day is always nice. Yeah.
Always a great day. So I think it's important because the resources you guys provide is passed down to us as agents. Yeah. And then we're able to pass that down to our clients as information, educational information. That's the whole reason why we started this podcast, was to provide educational content to our clients, but anybody that's out of the general public, and helping them to become educated and as well as informed as we possibly can be. So that way, when they're making any type of decision, whether it be pertaining to an individual drug plan, Medicare Advantage, or Medigap, they really feel empowered to make an informed decision. I think that's really kind of the end goal here, is to educate our clients and consumers. So much appreciated, for sharing that.
My pleasure.
Now, what we have going is what information you can share up to this point. We know that the final rules haven't been put in place yet, but for 2025, there's a lot of just chatter talk is 2025, the PDP, the $2,000 max out of pocket. So any insight you can provide us with that would be helpful as far as next year?
Yeah, and again, just as a reminder, this is very nuanced, and so I'll just talk in general about options and opportunities and what we think we might see across the board, not only in Michigan across the carrier landscape, but probably across the country, because this is something that's going to affect everybody. And I think there's a few different options that carriers might go with. And of course, all carriers right now are very, close lip, really tight lip right now. Nobody wants to say anything, and also nobody knows yet, to be honest. And we're kind of waiting to see what CMS is going to say again in June after feedback is given. I think the end date for providing feedback on this one is, I think, like the last day in May. So we'll probably get more information and updates from them and more clarification in June. But, we've talked about this before. When CMS makes certain regulation, especially when it's going to affect a commercial company's bottom line, their goal is they've got a duty and a due diligence, of course, to their members, but also to shareholders and also to employees to remain profitable. So when CMS, comes out with some type of regulation that's going to cut funding, where does that money go and where does that buck get passed? And at the end of the day, a commercial company, a commercial carrier is going to have to make hard decisions and say, okay, if this is going to cost us so much more money, where are we going to move the needle here and there to still make a profit by offering these plans and services to clients? So when we talk about whether it's a standalone PDP or let's say a Medicare Advantage plan, right? Something that a carrier might do is go, okay, we're going to accrue a huge cost here now on Part D, so and these prescription drugs, so premiums are going to have to go up across the board, whether it's MA or standalone PDP. Maybe we make some cuts or some deductions in certain plans and have degradation in benefits. You may even see something like, maybe a DSNP plan, right? So in the state of Michigan, our dual special needs plans here in Michigan, of course, offer, dental, but dental is also a coverage by Medicaid, right? Now, of course, a dual special needs plan, dental benefit is going to be better because that network is there, and you've got providers that are more willing to accept that Medicare network than they are to, bill directly to Medicaid just because of, fee for services and what they're going to get paid. But you might see a DSNP plan go, well, maybe we'll just get rid of covering dental to make up for the cost of the prescription drug because, these Medicaid clients already have this. That's like one theory of cutting benefits altogether or a degradation of benefits. The other opportunity is, of course, increasing premiums significantly in order to make up for this. I think another possibility that you might see is some organizations, some carriers going, okay, in maybe this county or this state, based on what our saturation is in the market, based on how many members we currently have, it's not financially sound for us to continue to offer this plan because we're not going to be able to make enough profit for it to make sense. So you may even see, if not this year, in the coming years, some carriers pull out of certain areas or certain states altogether where it financially doesn't make sense for them to offer a plan because of how much they would have to have the plan at in order to be competitive with other carriers in the market, and also their profitability with the plan at that rate. So I think you're going to see some changes, and I think something too that agents should be looking at is, in the last couple years, I'm sure you as an agency principal know, we've had a lot less mobility during AEP, where we've seen throughout the year a lot more movement and plan changes. And AEP, there's been a lot less movement, a lot less friction, a lot less plan changes and flips. I think with this new change, it's going to make AEP so much more competitive because plans and carriers are going to have to make a lot of different decisions and adapt in different ways. So you might see significant changes in premiums, significant changes in what's offered in a plan and in product and in services and reduction. Of course, earlier, in the year and last year, we got, rate cuts for Medicare Advantage from CMS, and you had carriers make different decisions on how they were going to react to that. cut of funding for Medicare Advantage by CMS. And you had some carriers go, okay, we're going to do major layoffs and major reorgs so that we can cut costs down internally so that we can limit the degradation of plan benefits for the consumer. And then you saw some carriers go, okay, we're going to increase benefits by a little bit this year, see if we can pull consumers in. But we all know that there's not a lot of longevity in increasing those benefits when you have to adapt to those cuts in fundings. Sure. And then you have some carriers that are like, we're going to do modest degradation of benefits over time so we can stay as stable as possible. Our consumers are going to see changes, but it might be, a few dollars here in premium, a few dollars, not a super huge increase in a benefit and then a cut of it the next year. So I think agents and consumers should be on the lookout that this AEP is going to be really important because you're going to start to see a lot of those big changes. And this is going to be an important year for agents to be really, educated and informed on all plans that are offered in an area, not just the favorites, but all plans, because you never know what's going to be best for the client that year. And keep in mind that might change the following year and you might have to flip and change people year to year. Whereas I think we've seen a lot of stability in the last few years and a lot of really tight and competitive plans. And I think that's going to change for 2025 because carriers are going to have to, like I said, they're going to have to pass that buck somewhere and remain profitable. So where we're going to see those changes is going to really be up to the carrier. And it's going to depend on, does the carrier have the capacity and the overhead to take that hit? Can they move things around here and there? What does network look like? So yeah, there's going to be a lot of changes. This is going to be an interesting AEP.
I think that's one of the things that why we as an agency strive to be in front of our clients as often and at least once a year, educating them on what changes are taking place and what's best for them, just to maintain that relationship and even strengthen that relationship over time. And I find myself often reminding clients that they're still a business because everybody wants to cast a stone at the insurance companies, and if there's a certain point they have to be profitable, and just like other business, and be like, but I need the insurance, I need these medications. At the end of the day, it comes out of their pocket, and so if the cost to acquisition doesn't make sense for them, then their doors can't stay open.
Right.
And so it has to work for everyone. So I think that's what we try to strive to remind them at the end of the day. And so, unfortunately, sometimes that's not always the case for everyone. It doesn't feel that way. So.
Yeah, well, and I think that there's a reason for that too, right? Because when we think of Medicare, we think, well, it's a government program. It's like government funded. It's like government run. I think especially consumers who haven't hit that 65 mark yet. I know before I got into the insurance field, that's what I assumed. I'm like, okay, Medicare, Medicaid, which one is which, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're like, okay, so Medicare is for 65 and over, or persons with a disability for more than 2 years, and Medicaid is for lower income. And you think once they hit 65, okay, they're just covered on Medicare. I think a majority of consumers believe that. So I think it's a hard transition for them to understand, no, these plans and products are regulated, by Medicare, and there are certain rules and regulations that are regulated by CMS, but they're serviced if it's beyond traditional Medicare. These products and plans are serviced by commercial companies, and they have to make a profit. This is America. Yeah. So finding that fine line between, taking care of a consumer and not even just, that's a whole other conversation between like the bare minimum and then talking about social determinants and coordination of care and behavioral health and all of these other things, renew, gym memberships and those like holistic, forms of care for our Medicare beneficiaries, but then also who's paying for that and how it's being regulated. So there's a dichotomy there because we are talking about Medicare, which is a government program, but it's facilitated by, private insurance companies. Yep. So it's kind of both. And that's hard, I think, for a lot of consumers to get acclimated with, especially those turning 65 for the first time.
I certainly could go down a rabbit hole as far as, people have shared with me as far as, well, look what Europe is doing, what's Canada doing, and what they don't realize is what they're paying in taxes to get that benefit. And I was in Italy 6 years ago in June and was involved in a critical motorcycle accident, spent 3 weeks in ICU over there. So I know what their healthcare system and what their facilities look like relative to here. it's a complete night and day difference. So, I mean, but we can go down that rabbit hole.
That'll be another podcast.
Day. Yeah. So, but I appreciate you coming today. This is extremely informational. And I know, like, as information comes along down the pipeline, we'll invite you on to come on and share more information, because the whole purpose of the channel is to educate our clients as well as just the general public. So, and to our viewers and our subscribers, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. That just gives us the opportunity to share to a greater audience. And if you have any family, friends, or peers, please share the channel with them. We'd be greatly appreciated. So again, thank you for watching this episode, and look forward to the next one. Thank you.